The Ishtar Gate stands as a silent, blue sentinel to a misunderstood world. You might think you know Babylon, a name synonymous with ancient sin and legendary excess. But the true city, buried beneath layers of sand and myth, holds secrets that defy every common assumption. By the end of this journey, you will possess 25 astonishing truths that rewrite the story of this ancient superpower. We will explore whether its most famous wonder was even built there and decipher a celestial map baked into its walls. What does a vanished civilization still whisper to us about ambition, ingenuity, and humanity itself? Our story begins with a name that is not the one we know. Long before the Greeks gave us the word Babylon, the city was known by a title that reveals its true soul to the world. Its original Akkadian name was Bab-Ilim, which translates directly as Gate of the God. This was not merely a label on a map. In the Mesopotamian worldview, names held immense power. They were declarations of essence and purpose. To call your city the Gate of the God was to claim it as a sacred threshold, the very point where the divine realm touched the earthly one. It was a statement of cosmic importance, suggesting that the gods themselves entered and exited the world through this metropolis. This foundational identity as a spiritual portal stands in stark contrast to the later images of decadence and sin that would become attached to its Hellenized name, Babylon. That Greek interpretation, Babylon, is essentially a phonetic echo, a foreign tongue wrapping itself around a sacred concept it only partially understood. So from its very inception, the city carried a dual identity, the profound, mystical gate of the god for those who built it, and the legendary, morally complex Babylon for those who later wrote its history. This first fact reframes everything. We are not approaching a city of mere earthly kings, but a place its founders believed was ordained by the heavens, a literal doorway for the divine. That profound identity as a divine gateway set the stage for legends, but perhaps the greatest legend attached to Babylon is a beautiful lie. The Hanging Gardens, celebrated for millennia as one of the 7 wonders of the ancient world, may never have graced Babylon's skyline at all. Our entire knowledge of them comes from second-hand Greek and Roman accounts, written centuries after Babylon's peak. Writers like Berossus and Strabo described terraced gardens rising like a green mountain, watered by complex machinery to soothe a homesick queen. It is a romantic tale, but archaeology has found a stubborn silence. No Babylonian text, no inscription from King Nebuchadnezzar II, who is credited with building them, ever mentions these gardens. Not a single shovelful of evidence in Babylon itself points to their existence. This absence has fueled one of history's greatest detective stories, led by scholar Stephanie Daly. Her investigation points the finger north to the Assyrian capital of Nineveh. There, she found royal inscriptions from King Sennacherib, boasting of a marvelous garden palace, a wonder for all people, featuring bronze water-raising screws, an advanced technology that matches the ancient descriptions perfectly. These Assyrian engineers were masters of hydraulics, building vast aqueducts to bring water to their city's heights. The case grows stronger when you consider the name. The Greeks, who first wrote of the wonder, often conflated the mighty empires of Assyria and Babylonia. Could a breathtaking garden built by Sennacherib in Nineveh have been mistakenly remembered generations later as belonging to Babylon? It is a compelling possibility. The true wonder, then, may not be a misplaced garden, but the enduring power of a story so captivating that we built it in our minds, cementing it to a city that might have only ever hosted it in legend. Whether the gardens bloomed in Babylon or Nineveh, their very concept defied the landscape. To create a verdant, mountain-like oasis in the dry, sun-baked plains of Mesopotamia was an act of breathtaking audacity. It demanded not just wealth, but a revolution in engineering. Picture the skeleton of such a structure, a ziggurat of life built from stone and soil. The terraces themselves would have been monumental, each level a hanging garden in truth, supported by vast stone arches and columns. But stone and soil are nothing without water. The true genius, the beating heart of the wonder, would have been hidden from view. Engineers would have first waterproofed every terrace with layers of bitumen, a natural tar, and sheets of lead to prevent the life-giving water from rotting the very structure it sustained. Then came the hydraulics, a system worthy of the gods. If we follow the Nineveh theory, King Sennacherib's own inscriptions boast of his innovation, the bronze water-raising screw. This was a simple, devastatingly clever machine, a helix inside a cylinder turned by manpower. A series of these screws working in a relentless chain could lift water from the Tigris River, step by laborious step, to a canal at the garden's base, and then again from one terrace to the next. It was a perpetual, human-powered fountain, defying gravity to bring the river to the sky. The plants themselves would have been a curated spectacle of empire, likely fruit trees like figs and pomegranates, fragrant cedars perhaps, and vibrant flowers, all chosen for their hardiness and beauty, a living collection showcasing the king's reach. The logistical scale is staggering, a constant symphony of labor, engineering, and maintenance just to keep a mountain of plants alive in a desert. This is why the legend endures. The story of the Hanging Gardens is not really about botany. It is a testament to the ancient mind's refusal to accept limits, a declaration that with enough will and ingenuity, even a desert could be made to bloom in the clouds. But even a garden in the sky is useless if the city below it falls. The true genius of Babylon was not just in its beauty, but in its sheer, unbreachable defiance. Its legendary walls were not a single barrier, but a nested system of defense, a fortress within a fortress. Ancient sources describe a staggering dual-wall system. The inner wall was called Enlil, meaning the god Enlil showed favor, and it was already colossal. But outside it ran Enlil. The god Enlil is the foundation of my wall. This outer wall was the stuff of legend, said to be so thick that 2 4-horse chariots could pass each other on its rampart. Picture that for a moment, a wall wider than a modern 4-lane highway, crowned with a racing track for war chariots. The facades of these walls were not bare mud brick. They were clad in glazed tiles, shimmering blue and decorated with golden lions and dragons, a dazzling and intimidating display of power visible for miles across the flat plain. Yet the walls were only the beginning. Beyond them lay a vast water-filled moat fed by the Euphrates River itself. Any army first had to cross this aquatic barrier under a hail of arrows, only to then face the sheer, polished faces of the walls. The gates were not simple doors, but massive, fortified complexes like the Ishtar Gate, set back and flanked by towering bastions, creating deadly kill zones for any force that tried to funnel through. But the design was also active. The walls featured protected sally ports, hidden doorways that allowed Babylonian defenders to launch surprise attacks against besiegers, then retreat back to safety. Some accounts even suggest the tops of the walls held counter-siege towers, mobile wooden platforms that could be rolled along the rampart to repel enemy assault towers wherever they threatened. This was not just a wall, it was a living, reactive organism of defense. Every element, from the psychological dazzle of its glazed beauty to the brutal practicality of its chariot-wide ramparts, communicated one message to the world. Babylon was not just a city, it was an idea, and that idea was permanent, unassailable, and divinely protected. To gaze upon those walls was to understand that conquest here was not just difficult, it was conceptually impossible. Yet even those formidable walls held a secret far more profound than military might. The Ishtar Gate was not simply an entrance, it was a celestial map in glazed brick. Every step through that towering blue archway was a walk through the heavens. The gate's design followed a strict, repeating pattern, a divine code in ceramic. Rows of magnificent golden horned bulls sacred to the storm god Adad alternated with rows of the serpent dragon Mushhushu, the beloved creature of Babylon's chief god Marduk. And pacing along the processional way leading to the gate were rows of majestic lions, the animal of the goddess Ishtar herself. This was not random decoration. Each creature was a deliberate emblem, a heraldic symbol of a major deity in the Babylonian pantheon. Together, they formed a living tapestry of divine power, a permanent assembly of the gods guarding the city's most sacred threshold. Some scholars believe the arrangement may have mirrored celestial order or important religious festivals, turning the gate into a fixed architectural chart of the cosmos. The dazzling visual impact was calculated down to the chemistry. That iconic lapis lazuli blue, a color associated with the divine and the night sky, was achieved through a complex alchemy. Artisans fired bricks with a glaze made from cobalt, copper, and silica, creating a shimmering, jewel-like surface. Against this deep blue field, the creatures stood out in brilliant white and gold detail, their forms molded in relief so they seemed to step out of the wall itself. To a visitor, whether a subject king or a conquered enemy, passing through was an overwhelming sensory and spiritual experience. You were literally walking beneath the gaze of the gods, through a man-made firmament, into the heart of a city that claimed to be the center of the universe. The gate was the ultimate statement of power, proclaiming that Babylon's authority was not just political but cosmic, sanctioned and protected by the very fabric of the heavens. That cosmic authority had to govern a very earthly reality, the delicate balance between wealth and survival. Beyond the gleaming gates and towering walls, Babylon's kings wielded a tool of power far more subtle than any army, a royal decree that could shatter financial chains with a single proclamation. This was the Mizraim Edict, a form of state-mandated debt forgiveness. When a new king ascended the throne or during times of severe economic crisis, he would issue this edict as a divine act of justice. It was not an act of mere charity or benevolence. It was a brilliant, calculated reset button for the entire economy. In an agricultural society prone to drought and poor harvests, small farmers often fell into crippling debt. They would borrow seed or silver from wealthy temples or officials, offering themselves or their family members as collateral. Without intervention, this created a spiraling crisis where more and more free citizens were enslaved for debt, stripping the kingdom of its tax base and its soldiers and brewing profound social unrest. The Mizraim Edict stopped this spiral dead. It declared all such consumer debts null and void, and it mandated the release of those who had been enslaved because of them. The ritual was powerfully symbolic. Officials would collect the clay tablets on which the debts were inscribed, and in a public ceremony they would be smashed, the baked clay shattering to dust. Imagine the sound, the visceral finality of it, as a mountain of personal obligation was physically destroyed before a crowd. This stands in fascinating contrast to the strict, literal justice of Hammurabi's famous code with its eye for an eye. That code provided the bedrock of daily law, but the Mizraim was the king's emergency lever for societal stability. It acknowledged that a kingdom could not run on law alone. It needed periodic economic amnesty to survive. This reveals a sophisticated, nuanced understanding of statecraft. The Babylonians knew that true power lay not just in enforcing contracts, but in knowing when to break them for the greater good, preventing the entire system from collapsing under its own weight. The lion's roar echoed through Babylon's streets in silent, ceramic form, but its meaning was far richer than a simple emblem of a king. This powerful creature was the sacred animal of Ishtar, one of the most complex and formidable deities in the entire Mesopotamian pantheon. Ishtar was a goddess of breathtaking duality, embodying both passionate love and brutal warfare, fertility and destruction. The lion was her perfect symbol, capturing all these fierce, untamable aspects. It represented her protective power, her capacity for wrath, and her potent, life-giving energy. When a Babylonian citizen looked upon the golden-maned lions pacing the processional way, they did not just see a royal mascot. They saw the living presence of their goddess, a divine guardian whose favor was as essential to the city's survival as its towering walls. This symbolism was woven into the very fabric of daily life. On cylinder seals rolled into clay to mark ownership, images of Ishtar standing upon a lion declared her authority. In temple rituals and prayers, invoking the lion was a way to call upon the goddess's strength. This stands in stark contrast to later cultures, like those of medieval Europe, where the lion became a more one-dimensional symbol of kingly courage and nobility. In Babylon, the lion's power was divine first and royal second. A king might align himself with the lion to claim Ishtar's favor, but the symbol's primary allegiance was to the goddess herself. It was a reminder that the forces governing life, love, and conflict were wilder and more profound than any human ruler, and that the city thrived under the watchful eye of a deity as magnificent and dangerous as the beast that represented her. The divine favor of Ishtar might have protected the city, but governing an empire required a system that moved faster than prayers. Babylon's true reach was measured not just in the width of its walls, but in the speed of its messengers. The empire operated a surprisingly advanced postal system, a network of royal couriers that functioned as the ancient world's internet. These messengers traveled along well-maintained royal roads, arteries of communication that connected the capital to distant provinces. Their mission was to carry the king's word, and they did so with an efficiency that would impress any modern logistics company. The key to their operation was a network of way stations spaced at intervals of a day's travel. At these posts, a weary messenger could find food, shelter, and a fresh horse, allowing the precious clay tablet he carried to continue its journey without delay. The message itself would be handed off to a rested colleague, creating a relay that could move vital information across hundreds of miles in a matter of days. This was not a public service for merchants or citizens. It was a tightly controlled instrument of state power. It allowed the king in Babylon to receive reports from his governors, issue commands to his armies, and collect taxes from the farthest corners of his domain with a speed that kept the sprawling empire coherent and under his direct thumb. The infrastructure revealed a sophisticated understanding that control was not about brute force alone, but about the flow of information. An empire could only be as strong as its fastest messenger. But moving a message quickly was pointless if it arrived in the wrong hands. The Babylonians solved the problem of privacy with a stroke of genius, using the very earth beneath their feet. Their secure communication method was the clay envelope tablet. The process was beautifully simple, yet utterly effective. A scribe would first inscribe the confidential message onto a small, damp clay tablet using a stylus. Once this inner tablet had dried to a leather-hard state, it was not sent out. Instead, it was carefully encased within a second, larger shell of fresh clay. This outer layer became the envelope. The scribe would then write the recipient's name and any delivery instructions on this outer shell, and sometimes even roll a cylinder seal across it to mark its official origin. The entire package was then baked hard, becoming a single, solid lump of clay. To read the message, the recipient had to deliberately break the outer casing. Any cracks or damage en route would be immediately obvious, revealing tampering. This system provided a near-perfect combination of security and authentication for its time. It ensured that only the intended eyes saw the contents, and the sealed clay served as proof that the words inside were the original, unaltered command from the king or his officials. In an age before paper, encryption, or digital signatures, this was a remarkably elegant solution. It turned a simple piece of mud into a locked diplomatic pouch, proving that the ancient mind was just as concerned with the integrity of information as we are today. The silent, broken fragments of these clay envelopes found by archaeologists are the physical evidence of an empire whispering to itself, ensuring its secrets traveled safe across the dusty roads. Those sealed messages carried the king's will, but the ultimate expression of his power touched the sky itself. The biblical Tower of Babel was not a myth born from nothing. It was a real, staggering monument that inspired awe and fear for centuries. This was the Etemenanke, a name meaning the foundation of heaven and earth. It was the central ziggurat of Babylon, a colossal seven-tiered mountain of baked brick dedicated to the city's chief god Marduk. Each tier, painted a different color and slightly smaller than the one below, rose in a majestic staircase toward the heavens. At its summit, not a tower, but a brilliant blue-glazed temple where it was believed Marduk himself would descend to meet the high priest. In the Babylonian worldview, this structure was the literal axis of the universe, the navel of the world where the divine and human realms connected. The scale was almost incomprehensible. Historical descriptions and archaeological remains suggest a base covering nearly the area of a modern city block, with a height that may have rivaled the Great Pyramid. For the exiled Hebrews who witnessed it centuries later during the Babylonian captivity, this monument was not a symbol of divine connection but of human hubris. The sheer, audacious scale of a building meant to reach the domain of the gods seemed the ultimate act of arrogance. The famous story of its destruction and the confusion of languages can be read as a powerful metaphor. After Babylon fell to the Persians, the great ziggurat, like the empire itself, fell into decay and ruin. The once unified imperial language of Akkadian began to fragment, replaced by Aramaic and others. For a conquered people, the crumbling of that mighty tower perfectly symbolized the end of a monolithic power that had once imposed its culture and tongue on others. The confusion of tongues was not a divine punishment for building high, but a poetic reflection of the real, chaotic cultural and linguistic shifts that followed empire's collapse. The story endures because it captures a timeless truth that the greatest human ambitions, even those baked in brick and dedicated to the gods, are ultimately temporary, destined to become lessons written in clay and scripture. The Etemenanke was far more than a silent monument. It was the pulsating heart of a ceremony that bound heaven and earth together. Each year, during the 12-day Akitu festival at the New Year, the entire cosmic order of Babylon was ritually dismantled and remade. This was not a simple celebration. It was the empire's most critical spiritual and political maintenance. The festival's climax was a ritual of profound intimacy and power known as the sacred marriage. In a chamber within the ziggurat, the king would enact a symbolic union with the goddess Ishtar, who was represented by a high priestess. This was no mere pageant. It was a direct, physical enactment of a divine covenant. The ritual was believed to channel the fertile, life-giving power of the goddess directly into the king, and through him into the very soil of the kingdom. His successful participation was proof that the gods, particularly Ishtar and Marduk, renewed their mandate for his rule. It was a contract signed not on clay but through sacred ceremony. For the people, this ritual was essential for their survival. A successful sacred marriage meant the gods would grant abundant rains, fertile fields, and healthy livestock in the coming year. A failed ritual or a king deemed unworthy threatened drought, famine, and chaos. The ziggurat, therefore, was not just a staircase to the gods, it was the chamber where the fate of the nation was negotiated annually. This practice reveals a worldview where politics and religion were inseparable strands of the same rope. The king's legitimacy did not come from an army or a bloodline alone. It was earned and reaffirmed in that darkened room, through a ritual that tied the prosperity of every farmer's field to the divine favor earned by one man. The towering ziggurat was both the symbol and the instrument of this belief, a constant reminder that Babylon's empire rested on a foundation of sacred ritual as much as on bricks and mortar. While the king performed sacred rituals for the gods, his astronomers were engaged in a different kind of celestial negotiation, one governed by a mathematical language so enduring it still dictates how we mark the passage of time. The Babylonians did not count in tens like we do, they thought in 60s. This base 60 or sexagesimal system was not an arbitrary choice. It was a stroke of practical genius born from the needs of commerce and the sky. The number 60 is a mathematical powerhouse divisible by 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 10, 12, 15, 20, and 30. In a world of barter and shared harvests, this made splitting grain, land, or weights into fair, whole number fractions incredibly easy without resorting to complex fractions. But its true legacy is written across our modern world in silent, constant testimony. Look at your clock, 60 seconds in a minute, 60 minutes in an hour, a direct inheritance from Babylonian sky watchers. They divided the circle into 360 degrees, another multiple of 60, because their yearly calendar had close to 360 days, and the sun seemed to move about 1 degree along the ecliptic each day. This framework was not just for geometry, it was the scaffold for an astronomical revolution. Using this base 60 system, Babylonian scholars created incredibly precise tables, tracking the motions of the moon and planets across the night sky. They could predict lunar eclipses with remarkable accuracy and compiled detailed catalogues of the stars, laying the foundational work for all Western astronomy. Every time you check the hour or navigate using degrees, you are unconsciously speaking the ancient language of Babylon, a testament to a system of thought so elegant and useful that it outlasted the empire that created it by thousands of years. That sophisticated understanding of the cosmos offered little comfort to a person gripped by fever or pain. In Babylon, the source of illness was never just a germ or a virus, it was a message. Medical diagnosis was a sacred art, a direct conversation with the gods conducted through the most unexpected medium, the liver of a sacrificed sheep. This practice was known as barutu or extispicy, and it was the cornerstone of both divination and medicine. When a patient fell ill, a priest-physician known as an ashapu was called. His first step was not to check a pulse but to perform a sacrifice. A healthy sheep would be offered to the relevant god, and its entrails, particularly the liver, were carefully extracted and examined under the bright sun. The Babylonians believed the liver was the seat of the soul and the emotions, a mirror reflecting the will of the gods. Every lobe, every groove, every slight discoloration or unusual mark on that liver was a syllable in a divine sentence. A bump on the gallbladder might signify an approaching enemy, while a split in one of the lobes could be an omen of recovery or death for the patient. To master this complex celestial script, apprentice priests trained not on animals but on clay. Archaeologists have found dozens of these clay model livers, meticulously crafted and inscribed. Each one is a textbook in 3 dimensions. The models are divided into sections with cuneiform labels pointing to specific features. Things like, if the mark appears here, the omen concerns the king's health, or if the portal vein looks like this, the patient will suffer for 30 days. These models standardized a vast, secret knowledge, turning the chaotic interior of an animal into a legible map of fate. Therefore, a diagnosis was always dual. The ashapu would observe the patient's physical symptoms, but he would simultaneously read the divine cause from the liver. A persistent headache might be diagnosed as the hand of a specific demon, indicated by a spotted mark on the clay model's right lobe. Treatment followed this dual path. It could involve medicinal herbs and poultices to address the body, but always coupled with incantations, amulets, or rituals to appease the angry god or drive out the invading demon. In the Babylonian mind, there was no separation between the spiritual and the physical body. To heal one, you absolutely had to read the other, and the gods had written their prognosis in the damp, dark clay of a sheep's liver. Reading the divine will in a sheep's liver was an intimate act of cosmic cartography, a way to map the unseen forces governing a single life. But the Babylonians also drew maps of a much grander scale, maps that placed their city not just in a kingdom, but at the very center of creation itself. The most famous of these is the Babylonian world map, often called the Imago Mundi, inscribed on a clay tablet now in the British Museum. To our modern eyes, it looks bizarrely schematic, almost childlike. A central rectangle, labeled clearly as Babylon, sits inside a ring representing the Maratu, the bitter ocean that encircled the known world. Radiating out from this circle like uneven spokes are triangular wedges labeled Assyria, Urartu, and other distant lands, depicted not as shapes but as strange, abstract regions. Beyond the ocean's ring, a series of small circles are marked. The map's creator explains as Nagu, remote islands where the sun is not seen. This was never meant to guide a traveler from one city to another. Its purpose was not geographical accuracy but cosmological declaration. The map is a statement of ideology baked into clay, a visual manifesto of Babylonian supremacy. By placing the city physically at the heart of the world, surrounded by the primordial waters of chaos and order, the map asserted a profound truth for its makers. Babylon was not just a powerful capital, it was the axis mundi, the stabilizing pivot around which all lands, all peoples, and even the cosmic ocean itself revolved. Every king who looked upon this map saw his divine mandate illustrated, a reminder that his duty was to maintain order in this central place against the chaotic, triangular unknowns at the world's edge. It was less a tool for exploration and more a ritual object to reinforce a worldview, proving that for the Babylonians, to draw the world was to define their own unquestioned place within it. Yet that world, centered on Babylon, was not solely a stage for kings and priests. Within its bustling streets and markets, a quieter revolution was taking place. The common assumption is that ancient Mesopotamian women lived in universal subjugation, but the legal clay tablets tell a far more nuanced story. Hammurabi's famous code, while a product of its patriarchal time, reveals surprising pockets of female independence. A woman could, under specific circumstances, own property, run a business, and engage in commerce as a legal entity in her own right. This was especially true for women who entered the religious sphere. The Nadatu women, priestesses dedicated to the god Shamash in the city of Sippar, are a prime example. These women often came from wealthy families and were given a substantial dowry upon entering the cloister. Crucially, this wealth remained under their control. Tablets show Nadatu women buying and selling fields, houses, and slaves, loaning out silver at interest, and acting as the sole signatory on complex business contracts. They were not hidden away, but active, shrewd participants in the city's economic life. Beyond the temple, ordinary women in urban centers like Babylon could operate taverns, a vital and regulated public space, or work as weavers, merchants, and even scribes. A marriage contract from the period might stipulate that a wife's dowry remained her separate property, and if her husband mismanaged it, she could divorce him and take it back. This is not to paint an anachronistic picture of modern equality. A woman's agency was heavily dependent on her social class and marital status, and the laws still heavily favored men in most familial matters. But the evidence shatters the monolithic image of silent, powerless women. It reveals a complex social fabric where, in the right contexts, a Babylonian woman could build a commercial empire from a temple cloister or negotiate a contract that would be honored in court, her seal pressed firmly into the clay beside any man. The legal agency of women was one facet of a society built on meticulous order, an order that extended even to the unpredictable river that gave it life. The Euphrates was both Babylon's lifeline and its greatest existential threat. A single, catastrophic flood could erase decades of building in a day. The city's engineers responded not with simple walls, but with a comprehensive, integrated hydraulic system that turned a dangerous river into a tamed, productive partner. The first line of defense was the riverfront itself, massive embankments or quays lined with baked bricks sealed with bitumen ran for miles along the Euphrates as it flowed through the city's heart. This was not a simple dirt levee. The baked brick facing resisted erosion, while the thick, tarry bitumen acted as a powerful waterproof seal, preventing the river from saturating and weakening the city's foundations from below. It was like constructing a giant, submerged bathtub wall along the entire waterfront, keeping the urban soil dry and stable, but holding the water back was only half the solution. The real genius lay in the network of controlled release. A system of canals, sluice gates, and vast artificial reservoirs, like the immense Lake of Babylon to the city's north, acted as a giant pressure valve for the entire region. During the spring snowmelt from distant mountains, when the Euphrates swelled beyond its banks, engineers could divert the dangerous excess into these canals and reservoirs, preventing a disastrous surge through the city center. Then, during the dry, scorching summer months, that stored water could be carefully released back into the canals to irrigate the endless fields that fed the metropolis. This was civil engineering as a form of rhythmic, seasonal diplomacy with nature. It required an astonishing depth of topographic knowledge and long-term planning. Building and maintaining such a system meant coordinating thousands of laborers, from bricklayers and bitumen workers to surveyors and gatekeepers. Every canal had to be dredged, every sluice gate maintained, every reservoir bank reinforced. The result was a man-made landscape where water obeyed human command, allowing a city of hundreds of thousands to thrive in a floodplain that would otherwise be a place of perilous cycles of drought and deluge. Babylon's walls defended it from human enemies, but this quieter, wetter architecture defended it from the earth itself. 4,000 years ago, a merchant named Nani sat down with a lump of wet clay and a stylus, and in a fit of profound frustration, he made history. His complaint, sent to a copper supplier named Nasir around the year 1750 before the Common Era, is the oldest known written customer complaint in the world. The tablet survives, and its anger is still palpable across the millennia. Nani writes, quote, "You said, I will give good copper to Gimel Sin, that you said, but you did not do. You offered bad copper to my messenger and said, take it or leave it. He continues, who am I that you treat me so contemptuously? I have sent as messengers gentlemen like ourselves to collect the bag with my money, but you have treated me with contempt." The details are wonderfully specific, a business deal gone sour. Nani had sent his agents with good silver to buy copper, but Nasir provided substandard goods and was rude to the messengers. Nani demands to know where the quality copper is and insists that he will handpick new ingots himself from Nasir's stockpile. This is not just an ancient Yelp review. It is a legal document, a formal notice of grievance in a society where commerce was the lifeblood. The very fact that Nani wrote it and that Nasir kept it, likely for his own records, reveals a sophisticated commercial culture with established expectations. There were standards for commodity quality, there were protocols for business conduct, and there were mechanisms, perhaps involving local authorities or temples, to adjudicate such disputes. Nani's indignation shows he expected those standards to be upheld, that a merchant's word was his bond. It shatters the distant, impersonal image of the Bronze Age, bringing us face to face with a person just like us, exasperated by bad service and poor product, taking the time to write a strongly worded letter. In his anger, Nani did something extraordinary. He gave a voice not to a king or a god, but to the universal human experience of getting a raw deal. Nani's complaint was a plea for earthly justice, but for the Babylonians, the most important messages were not sent by merchants. They were written nightly across the dark canvas of the sky. In their world, astronomy and astrology were not separate disciplines. They were two sides of the same sacred coin. Every star, every planet, every eclipse was a direct communique from the gods, a celestial text to be decoded by trained scribes. These scholar priests did not just chart the heavens for navigation or a calendar. They were divine cryptographers, reading the movements of the cosmos as a living forecast for the king, the state, and every individual. Their master reference was a vast collection known as the Enuma Anu Enlil, a series of 70 clay tablets containing thousands of specific omens. This was the ultimate celestial almanac, a database of cause and effect linking heavenly phenomena to earthly events. The logic was precise, almost mechanical. One entry might state, if Venus disappears in the east on the 16th day, there will be a famine in the land. Another might warn, if the moon is surrounded by a halo and Jupiter stands within it, the king of Akkad will be besieged. The sky was not random. It was a complex, predictable language of divine intention. Priests would spend each night on the rooftops of tall ziggurats, meticulously recording what they saw on small, handheld clay tablets. They noted the exact timing of a planet's rise, the color of the moon, the appearance of a comet. Then they would rush to consult the Enuma Anu Enlil, cross-referencing their observation with the ancient texts to produce a report for the palace. The consequences were immediate and real. If the omens predicted a poor harvest, the king might order extra grain into the royal storehouses. If they foretold rebellion in a province, he might dispatch additional troops or replace a governor. On a personal level, a wealthy citizen might consult an astrologer before a business journey or a marriage, seeking a day when the celestial signs were favorable. This practice made the sky a constant, pressing concern, a real-time news feed from the divine realm that required expert interpretation. It was a science driven by faith, a relentless search for order in the universe that believed every ripple in the night held meaning for the fate of an empire. The celestial omens dictated the timing, but the city's true renewal happened on the ground, along a path paved with divine purpose. The processional way was not a street for carts and commerce, it was a sacred stage, its blue-glazed bricks and golden lions waiting in silence for the one event that defined the Babylonian year, the Akitu festival. For 11 months, this grand avenue was a dormant artery, but for those 12 days of the new year, it pulsed with the heartbeat of the cosmos. The ritual began with a journey by water. The statue of the city's chief god, Marduk, along with effigies of other major deities, was carefully placed upon a magnificent ceremonial barge. This divine flotilla would then sail along the Euphrates Canal, a symbolic voyage from Marduk's temple, the Esagila, to a small temple outside the city walls. This represented the god leaving his home, a moment of profound vulnerability for the world. After several days of rituals in that outer temple, the statues began their triumphant return, but not by water. This was the moment the processional way lived for. The god statues, now mounted on towering, ornate chariots or carried on the shoulders of the highest priests, began their slow, majestic parade back into the city's heart. The air would have been thick with incense and the sound of hymns, the way lined with thousands of citizens, all witnessing the gods literally walking among them on a path of lapis lazuli and gold. And here the king's role was shockingly humble. As Marduk's statue approached the towering Ishtar Gate, the ruler of Babylon would step forward. In a breathtaking act of symbolic submission, the king would be stripped of his regalia, his scepter and crown removed. He would then be led before the statue of the god, where a high priest would strike the king across the face and pull his ears. This was not punishment, but a ritual test. If the king shed tears, it was a sign that Marduk was pleased and would renew his divine mandate for another year. The king's humility proved the god's supremacy. Only after passing this test would the ruler have his symbols of power returned, and he would then grasp the hand of Marduk's statue, a gesture known as taking the hand of Bel, and lead the god in the final procession to his temple. This entire spectacle, from the water journey to the royal humiliation, was a meticulously scripted drama of death and rebirth. It reenacted mythical battles, confirmed the cosmic order, and most importantly, it visually demonstrated that the king's power flowed directly from the god, renewed annually on that glittering road. To walk the processional way on any other day was to walk through a museum of power, but to walk it during the Akitu festival was to step inside a living myth, where stone lions roared with the voices of gods and a king's tears were the most powerful currency in the empire. The Akitu festival's divine mathematics, however, was rooted in a far more practical human invention. The Babylonians achieved a conceptual leap so profound it became the invisible bedrock of our digital age. They invented the idea of place value. To grasp the sheer genius of this, we must forget our modern numbers entirely. Picture the Roman numeral system, which was purely additive. The number 187 would be written as CLXXXVII. You arrive at the total by adding all those symbols together: 100 plus 50 plus 10 plus 10 plus 10 plus 5 plus 1 plus 1. It is a cumbersome process, and performing any complex arithmetic with it is a slow, torturous affair. The Babylonian system was radically different. They used just two basic cuneiform marks, a vertical wedge for the number 1 and a corner-shaped wedge for the number 10. The magic was not in the symbols themselves, but in where you put them. They arranged these wedges in columns, and the position of a column gave it a different value. The rightmost column was the ones place, just like ours, but the column to its left was not the tens place, it was the 60s place, reflecting their base 60 system. The next column over was the 3600s place, which is 60 times 60. With just those two simple wedges, a scribe could write any number from 1 to a figure in the millions, simply by grouping them into the correct positions. So the Babylonian numeral for 187 would not be a long string of added symbols. It would be a compact, elegant grouping, 3 corner wedges in the 60s column, that is 3 times 60 or 180, and then 7 vertical wedges in the ones column. One compact notation, one clear value. This abstraction, the idea that a symbol's meaning changes based on its location, is the cornerstone of all modern mathematics and computing. Our entire digital world runs on binary code, which is just a place value system using only two symbols, 0 and 1, in different positions. This revolutionary tool was not born in a philosopher's tower, but in the bustling warehouses and temple storerooms of Mesopotamia. Accountants tracking vast harvests of barley or merchants calculating debts in silver needed a fast, reliable, and scalable way to handle large numbers. The place value system was their solution, a cognitive shortcut that turned arithmetic from a slow art of accumulation into a swift science of position. Every time a computer executes a command, it is silently echoing a calculation first made on a sun-dried clay tablet 4,000 years ago, proving that the most world-changing ideas often begin with the simple need to count things correctly. The mathematical genius that powered their tablets also measured out the most common transaction in daily life, a frothy, nourishing brew. Beer in Babylon was far more than a simple pleasure. It was a fundamental pillar of civilization, a form of liquid currency that fueled both the body and the economy. In a land where water from canals and the Euphrates could be contaminated, beer was a safer, more nutritious alternative. The brewing process, which involved boiling the water and fermenting barley, killed harmful pathogens, making it a staple beverage for everyone from children to the elderly. But its role was vastly more complex. The standard daily wage for a laborer, like those building the Great Ziggurat, was not paid in silver but in bread and beer. Cuneiform records from construction projects detail precise rations, so many liters of beer per day based on the worker's rank and the difficulty of the task. This was practical. The beer provided calories, hydration, and essential vitamins from the fermented grain, keeping a massive workforce fed and functional. It was also a stable, non-perishable unit of value in an economy where coinage did not yet exist. You could trade jars of beer for goods, use it to pay rent, or offer it as a religious tithe to the temple. The industry itself was sophisticated and diverse. Texts mention over 20 different varieties of beer, classified by quality, ingredients, and strength. There were dark beers, light beers, red beers, and beers flavored with dates, honey, or herbs. The brewing process was largely the domain of women. These female brewsters, often working from their own homes or in temple breweries, were respected professionals. They would bake a special barley bread called bapia, crumble it into water, and allow the natural yeast to ferment the mixture in large clay jars. The result was a thick, porridge-like drink consumed through straws to filter out the husks and sediment. In taverns, which were common gathering places, this social lubricant facilitated everything from business deals to community gossip. To share a beer was to engage in the basic commerce of human connection, a ritual as old as the city's walls. So when we think of Babylonian currency, we should not picture only silver and gold, but also the humble, sustaining bubbles rising in a clay jar, the true drink of empire. That same beer might have flowed freely at a feast that became a legend, a story so powerful it gave the world an idiom for imminent disaster. The phrase "the writing on the wall" comes directly from a tale set in Babylon, recorded in the biblical book of Daniel. It describes a lavish banquet thrown by King Belshazzar. As the king and his nobles drank wine from sacred vessels looted from the temple in Jerusalem, a disembodied human hand suddenly appeared. It wrote 4 mysterious Aramaic words on the plaster of the palace wall: Min, Tekel, Upharsin. The entire court was terrified, for no one could decipher the message. The prophet Daniel was summoned. His interpretation was a devastating judgment. Min, meaning numbered. God has numbered the days of your kingdom and brought it to an end. Tekel, meaning weighed. You have been weighed on the scales and found wanting. Upharsin, meaning divided. Your kingdom is divided and given to the Medes and Persians. That very night, according to the story, Babylon fell. The historical kernel behind this dramatic legend is fascinating. Belshazzar was indeed a historical figure, but he was never the sole king of Babylon. He served as co-regent and crown prince, ruling the city while his father, King Nabonidus, was away for years at a distant oasis devoted to the moon god Sin. This unusual absence created a power vacuum and weakened the kingdom's stability. The Persian king Cyrus the Great seized this moment. In the year 539 before the Common Era, his army diverted the Euphrates River, marched along the dry riverbed into the city under its walls, and captured Babylon with astonishing speed, likely while Belshazzar was in command. The sudden, almost anticlimactic nature of the conquest, a mighty empire falling in a single night, cried out for a divine explanation. The story of the writing on the wall provided it, transforming a military event into a moral parable about hubris and divine retribution. A proud king defiles sacred objects, and the universe itself literally writes his doom in plain sight. This is why the phrase endures. It captures that chilling moment when an unheeded warning becomes an irreversible fate, a message of judgment that appears just before the fall, whether of an empire or a personal fortune. The sudden fall of an empire could be written on a wall, but its daily survival was written in the stars and the seasons. To feed a city of hundreds of thousands, Babylon's priests had to master time itself with a lunisolar calendar of remarkable precision. Their months were strictly lunar, each beginning with the first sighting of the crescent moon, creating cycles of 29 or 30 days. But this presented a colossal problem. 12 of these lunar months add up to only about 354 days, falling short of the solar year by roughly 11 days. If left unchecked, the calendar would slide backward through the seasons, and a month named for the spring harvest would soon find itself in the dead of winter, throwing the entire agricultural cycle, and thus the empire's food supply, into chaos. The solution was not a fixed rule, but a living science. Teams of astrologer priests maintained a constant vigil of the night sky, tracking key celestial markers. Their most critical observations were the spring equinox and the heliacal rising of certain stars, the moment a star first becomes visible just before dawn after a period of being lost in the sun's glare. When their meticulous records showed the lunar months drifting too far out of sync with these solar and stellar signposts, they would intervene with a royal decree. An extra month called an intercalary month would be inserted into the year. Most often, this was a second Adaru added right before the New Year festival. This was not a regular event like our modern leap day. It was a dynamic correction, a declaration made by the state based on direct celestial evidence. The decision had profound consequences. It determined the correct time for planting and harvesting, for collecting taxes in kind, and for holding the all-important Akitu festival to ensure the gods' continued favor. This system reveals a society that viewed time not as a rigid grid, but as a flexible, sacred rhythm to be carefully negotiated between the moon's silver cycles and the sun's life-giving journey. Their calendar was a testament to the belief that human order must constantly align with cosmic order, and that the empire's bread depended on the priest's ability to read the sky. The cosmic calendar kept the kingdom in rhythm, but the throne itself was often occupied by men whose first language was not Babylonian. The city's immense prestige made it the ultimate prize, a crown jewel that conquerors from across the region fought to possess and claim as their own. This pattern began early. Hammurabi, the lawgiver whose name is synonymous with ancient Babylon, was not a native son of the city. He was an Amorite from a semi-nomadic West Semitic people who had migrated into Mesopotamia. His famous dynasty established Babylon's first period of greatness, but he was in origin an outsider. Centuries later, the Kassites, a people from the Zagros Mountains, would rule Babylon for nearly 400 years, one of the longest dynasties in its history. And its most famous builder, Nebuchadnezzar II, was a Chaldean from a tribal group that had settled in the marshy lands of southern Mesopotamia. This recurring theme reveals a fascinating paradox. Babylon was so culturally dominant that to rule it, you had to become it. Foreign kings did not come to erase Babylonian identity, they came to adopt it, often with fervent enthusiasm. Upon seizing power, a new ruler's first act was almost always to take the hand of the statue of Marduk during the Akitu festival, publicly receiving the god's mandate. They would then pour resources into restoring and expanding the city's temples, ziggurats, and walls, inscribing their deeds in flawless Babylonian cuneiform. Nebuchadnezzar, the Chaldean, became the greatest patron the city ever knew, its skyline a testament to his devotion. This was brilliant statecraft. By embracing and amplifying the local religion, language, and architectural traditions, these foreign dynasties legitimized their rule in the eyes of the priests and the people. They presented themselves not as destroyers, but as the true heirs and protectors of Babylonian civilization, its most pious sons. The result was a cultural snowball effect. Each wave of conquerors added a new layer: Amorite legal concepts, Kassite artistic styles, Chaldean engineering prowess, all absorbed into the ever-growing tapestry of what it meant to be Babylonian. The city became a cosmopolitan magnet, its identity not defined by a single bloodline, but by an idea so powerful that it could transform a mountain chieftain or a tribal sheikh into the divine king of the world's center. But the story of foreign kings ruling Babylon takes on a different, more poignant dimension when seen from the perspective of those brought there not by ambition but by force. The phrase Babylonian captivity conjures images of chains and dungeons, a people broken in a foreign land. The reality, as pieced together from both biblical texts and archaeological evidence, was far more complex and strategically nuanced. When King Nebuchadnezzar II's armies subdued the rebellious kingdom of Judah, their policy was not mere slaughter but calculated transplantation. The elite of Judean society, the royal family, skilled artisans, scribes, and priests, were forcibly relocated to the heart of the Babylonian Empire. This was a classic imperial tactic, removing the leadership and brain trust from a restive province to neuter its ability to rebel, while importing useful talent to the capital. The journey was undoubtedly traumatic, a long, dusty march into the unknown, a profound rupture from their homeland and the temple in Jerusalem. yet upon arrival they were not cast into prisons. Instead, they were settled in designated communities. The book of Ezekiel mentions a settlement called Tel Aviv by the river Chebar, a canal near the city of Nippur. Here, the exiles could build homes, farm plots of land, and engage in trade. Some, like the prophet Ezekiel himself, clearly owned property and operated with a degree of autonomy. They lived in a state of settled exile, a dispersed community within the sprawling Babylonian world. This was not freedom, it was a gilded cage, but it was a cage with room to breathe, think, and write. The trauma of displacement was searing, giving rise to some of the Bible's most heartbreaking psalms, songs of weeping by the rivers of Babylon. Yet this intense, prolonged cultural contact forced a profound theological crisis and ultimately a revolution. Surrounded by the overwhelming grandeur of Marduk's ziggurat and the nightly celestial omens, the exiled priests and thinkers faced a desperate question: had their God, Yahweh, been defeated by the gods of Babylon? Their answer, forged in the crucible of exile, was radical. They began to articulate a vision of a universal, all-powerful deity who was not tied to one land or one temple, but who was sovereign over all nations, even using a king like Nebuchadnezzar as his unwitting instrument. Concepts of personal responsibility, messianic hope, and a more structured monotheism crystallized during this period. The very texture of biblical literature was shaped here, from the sophisticated history writing of the Deuteronomistic texts to the apocalyptic visions of Daniel. The exile was a national catastrophe, but it also became a transformative intellectual and spiritual incubator, proving that sometimes a people's most enduring ideas are not born in triumph at home, but in thoughtful struggle under the shadow of a foreign ziggurat. The exile's profound reflections on medicine and the human condition were mirrored by the very real physical practices of Babylonian physicians, who pursued healing with a blend of ritual and remarkable innovation. Their medical knowledge extended far beyond simple herb poultices into a territory that feels startlingly modern. Babylonian doctors practiced a form of time-release medicine, a concept we associate with modern pharmacology. They understood that the body processes substances over time, and they sought to control that timeline with ingenious formulations. For common ailments, a physician might prepare a pill or, more often, a suppository, not as a single-dose item but as a layered delivery system. Using materials readily available in their environment, they would coat the core medicinal compound, which might contain ingredients like ground willow bark or henbane, with successive layers of different substances. Each layer had a specific purpose. An inner coat might be a fast-dissolving fat, designed to release an initial dose of medicine quickly to address acute symptoms. Around that, they might apply a slower-dissolving layer of a specific clay or a wax, intended to withstand the earlier stages of digestion and only break down later in the intestines to deliver a secondary, sustaining dose. The goal was to prolong the therapeutic effect or to stage it, managing symptoms over many hours with a single administration. This was not guesswork, but the result of careful, experimental observation. These physicians had catalogued the properties of countless natural materials, noting which fats melted at body temperature, which clays resisted stomach acids, and how long various resins took to dissolve. They were, in essence, early biomedical engineers, manipulating the physical chemistry of their materials to achieve a desired biological outcome. This practice reveals a medical mindset that was deeply sophisticated and actively experimental. It moves us beyond the image of the priest-physician solely chanting incantations into the realm of the practical healer conducting methodical trials, striving to harness time itself in the service of easing suffering. Even the most brilliant hydraulic system can be turned against its creators. For centuries, Babylon's engineers had mastered the Euphrates, turning its unpredictable flow into a source of life and a moat of defense. Yet in the year 539 before the Common Era, that mastery was used as a weapon by a brilliant conqueror, Cyrus the Great of Persia. The story, immortalized by the Greek historian Herodotus, reads like a heist against an entire city. Faced with Babylon's legendary, unscalable walls, Cyrus did not order a futile siege. Instead, he looked at the river that flowed directly through the city's heart and saw a back door. According to the account, his army spent months digging massive upstream canals, diverting the waters of the Euphrates into a vast, artificial reservoir. This was an act of staggering ambition, a public works project in reverse, executed in secret under the noses of the Babylonian defenders. The goal was not to flood the city, but to drain it just enough. On the chosen night, the sluice gates were opened, and the river's main current was siphoned away. The water level in the channel running beneath Babylon's walls dropped from a deep, protective flow to a shallow, manageable stream, perhaps only thigh-high. The timing was everything. Herodotus claims the city was in the midst of a great religious festival, likely involving the very king, Belshazzar, and his nobles. In the revelry, the bronze gates that spanned the river at the waterline, normally kept shut and guarded, were left open. Through this aquatic breach, Cyrus's elite soldiers waded silently up the riverbed, emerging like specters from the water inside the city's walls. They met little resistance, capturing key points before the alarm could even be raised. The mighty city, which had withstood sieges for generations, fell in a single, shocking night. While historians debate the literal truth of every detail, the story's power is undeniable as a symbol. Babylon's greatest strength, the Euphrates, the artery that fed its gardens and filled its moats, became its fatal weakness. It reveals a profound truth about defense, that every system, no matter how ingenious, contains the seed of its own potential failure. The Persians did not break the walls, they simply understood the city's blueprint better than its defenders, and they walked in through the one entrance everyone assumed was impassable. Yet even the river's betrayal could not erase the city from memory, only from sight. For centuries after its final decline, Babylon became a ghost, a name whispered by travelers and scholars, its physical reality swallowed by the very silt of the Euphrates it once commanded. By the time serious archaeology began in the 19th century, the site was not a city, but a series of low, windswept mounds, a puzzle of dirt and time. The task of resurrecting it fell to a German architect turned archaeologist, Robert Koldewey. His excavation, beginning in 1899, was not a treasure hunt but a feat of industrial-scale, meticulous detective work. He employed hundreds of local workers in a grid system, moving mountains of earth by hand and basket. Koldewey was a revolutionary for his time, obsessed with context and structure over mere artifact collection. When his team hit upon a wall of brilliant blue glazed brick, he did not simply pull it out. He recognized he had found the fabled Ishtar Gate, and he painstakingly traced its entire outline, revealing the grand processional way. His greatest insight was understanding that the sun-dried mudbrick of Babylon, so different from the stone of Egyptian monuments, required a new method. He developed the excavation technique of tracing the subtle discoloration in the soil left by disintegrated bricks, allowing him to map entire rooms and streets from mere stains in the earth. For over 18 years, Koldewey labored, shipping thousands of fragments of the gate back to Berlin, where it was painstakingly reconstructed into the awe-inspiring museum centerpiece we know today. His work gave solid form to the legends, proving that the city of Nebuchadnezzar was not a myth, but a breathtaking historical reality. Yet this modern resurrection created a new, complex legacy. In the late 20th century, Babylon became a symbol once more, this time for a modern dictator's ambition. Saddam Hussein ordered a massive, garish reconstruction directly atop the ancient ruins. New bricks stamped with his name were laid into the walls, and a colossal palace was built overlooking the site, distorting the archaeological record and causing irreversible damage. Then, during the Iraq War in the early 2000s, the site was further ravaged, turned into a military camp by coalition forces, Tanks crushed ancient pathways, trenches were dug through archaeological layers, and sandbags were filled with soil containing priceless fragments of pottery and brick. The city that had survived conquest by Cyrus and Alexander could not survive the blunt force of modern conflict. Today, Babylon stands as a profound palimpsest, a layered document of human history. Its foundation is the genius of Nebuchadnezzar's engineers. Upon that is written the careful script of cold science. Scrawled over that is the heavy signature of a modern tyrant. And etched across it all are the scars of recent war. To walk there now is to witness not one Babylon but many, a testament to both our enduring fascination with ancient glory and our recurring failure to protect it. Babylon's true legacy is not found in any single wall, tablet, or fallen brick, but in the indelible shadow it cast across history. Our journey through these 25 astonishing facts reveals a civilization of staggering innovation, profound spirituality, and complex humanity. This was far more than a city of sin or a simple biblical villain. It was a place where engineers tamed rivers, mathematicians conceived the framework of our time, and priests mapped the will of the gods onto sheep livers and stars. It was a society where women could command economic empires from temple cloisters, and where a king's power was ritually broken and renewed each year by the tears he shed before a statue. The echoes of Babylon are not silent. They resonate in the 60 seconds of our minute, in the 360 degrees of our circle, and in the very concept of a place value system that powers our digital world. Its stories, from a misplaced garden to a complaint about bad copper, remind us that these were people with hopes, frustrations, and a relentless drive to build, calculate, and understand their place in the cosmos. So the next time you glance at a clock or hear the phrase "the writing on the wall," remember the blue-glazed city at the center of the world. Which of these 25 facts surprised you the most? Share your thoughts below, and if you enjoyed unraveling this historical mystery, subscribe to continue exploring the hidden secrets of the ancient world. For if a civilization as colossal as Babylon can still whisper to us from beneath the sand, imagine what other wonders are waiting patiently for their stories to be told.